You're listening to Your Highest Self Podcast, episode 85.
Today, we are going to be talking about moving between your divine feminine and your divine masculine energies.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. We're so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the time to invest in your mind and your feminine energy and doing it with us today. I'm back with my co-host Lucas, and as you heard, we've got a really amazing, interesting topic lined up for today.
You know what's really cool about this topic is we didn't practice.
Nope, this is coming to you live and raw.
Live and raw. Awesome. Welcome back. So a lot of people spend some time thinking about moving between things, right? You move between home and work. You move between your bed and your shower in the morning. You move between your office and your kitchen when it's lunchtime, right? And we do our movement differently in each way. But one thing is similar in all of those things that I just talked about, and that is that we're moving physically. There's also an energetic component. When you move from your office to your kitchen at lunch, you're energetically releasing your work self and energetically entering into your take care of myself self, right? Because very literally, when you're eating lunch, you're taking care of yourself. But how many people spend time thinking about doing that well, doing that with intent, doing that in a way that makes you wholly in control of the movement of the energy? How many times have you thought about that, Shanae?
Not consistently, that's for sure. When I'm being conscious of it, it's actually, okay, this is when I do it. I intentionally do it going into and coming out of client coaching calls. I intentionally set the energy. I take a couple minutes to ground. I burn some sage. I cleanse my energy going into the container, and same coming out of it, because my calls tend to be, sometimes they're a bit heavy, sometimes there's lots of emotions. And so it's important for me to be able to close that container and cut that energetic cord so that it's not following me into the next thing that I do or the next client that I see. So I definitely intentionally do it then. I intentionally do it in the mornings when I do my morning self-care of breath work and Reiki and journaling. And when I go into my evening routine as like a wind down, I make my little, I call chamomile chamomile. Want to make my chamomile tea, and I'm winding down. That's when I do it, but I don't do it kind of going into lunch or all those other times. So that's
You
really,
do it
really
with your lavender too.
my lavender when I snort it to go to bed.
Yes.
Yeah, that's something that you taught me, because I was actually suffering from like really bad jet lag when I was in Georgia a couple months ago. Like really, I couldn't fall asleep till like 3 or 4 a.m. And so I started this wind down routine that Lucas told me to do, where I 30 minutes before I want to start winding down for bed, I start a little ritual where I put lavender on my wrist, lavender essential oil, and I like aggressively snort it. And then I move into a little visualization meditation where I visualize myself getting ready to wind down. And actually, you told me to do this before my productivity sessions as well. And
Yes.
when I host my co-working sessions with my clients, we start with a grounding visualization meditation where I have them visualize what are the tasks that we're going to work on during this session. How is it going to feel like when you complete it? And we do that. So actually, now that I think about it, maybe I do unconsciously do that.
That's awesome. So one of the reasons why that's something that I taught you is because I actually teach that stuff professionally. I teach people how to be productive. Now, I don't teach it in terms of moving from divine feminine to divine masculine, but I do teach it in terms of moving from a productivity state and into a self-care state, and then the reverse, from a self-care state into a productivity state.
Mm.
Right now, there's a masculine and feminine component to both of those. Theoretically, when we're in a productivity state, we're a little bit more towards the masculine side. But if you're not well balanced, right, if you're not funneling through your feminine, chances are you're probably not going to be successfully productive. You're going to miss things. You're going to overpound on the wrong things. How many times have you written an email? This is to your audience, not you specifically. Gotten to the end of the email and realized you used the exclamation point on every single sentence. Right? That sounds like an unbalanced email to me. And that probably came from an unbalanced energy and an unbalanced state of mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, we think of productivity as being more masculine, and I agree, but you still have to be balanced. We think of self-care as being more feminine, and I agree, but you still have to be balanced. So now we're going to talk about, instead of moving from productive to self-care, self-care to productive, now we're going to talk about moving from masculine to feminine and from feminine to masculine.
Ooh, I love it.
But the tricks are still the same.
Mm-hmm.
The trick is we carry around baggage all the time. Everybody does, even reasonably well-balanced, thoughtful, mindful people like you and I, we're carrying around baggage, and we have to do things to unburden ourselves in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
right? You want to add to that?
No, keep going.
Okay, so we have to do stuff to unburden ourselves in the moment. And it's not quite the same as taking our baggage off and leaving it behind. That takes a lot of work. And it's work that everybody has to do all the time, because as you go through life, you pick up baggage and you have to do the work to continue to remove it,
Mm-hmm.
right? To continue to unburden yourself long term. But short term, in the moment right now, if I've got 20 minutes that I need to be doing something and I need to be balanced, I don't have 2 days of preparation available in between now and when I start my 20 minutes of work,
Mm-hmm.
in order to be able to unburden myself entirely of all the things that I've been carrying around, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I need to do is I need to be able to just shrug off my baggage so that I'm free to move into a healthy, balanced state for the next 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what does that look like? Well, first, mindfulness. Everybody says this, and there's way more to it than that. So don't turn off the podcast and say, these guys don't know what they're talking about. I know mindfulness, right? But truly, first, mindfulness. Your psyche, the way that you approach the world and interact with the world, it requires that you know what you're about to do. And that's a long way of talking about mindfulness. Mindfulness of what's coming, mindfulness of where you are right now. So be clear where you are, that you have baggage and you need to shrug it off, and be clear that you're going to spend the next 20 minutes doing a thing and you need to be balanced while you're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's self-care or productive work or a lovemaking session with your significant other. Hopefully that'll be longer than 20 minutes. Maybe shorter if you're not balanced.
Something to think about.
Right? So again, first be mindful of your current circumstances and mindful of what it is that you're entering into. What is the purpose of this chunk, this period that you're entering into, and not the menstrual cycle period. Although this is true of that too, more the next activity that you're going to be in and how long that is. All right.
Mm-hmm.
From mindfulness, open yourself up to what needs to be done to be clear and present, right? And that's why mindfulness comes first, because you need to understand what your baggage is and what you're going to do with it so that you can be clear and present. And that's your goal, to drive through the purpose of the moment, is to be clear and present in that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so open yourself up to what it is that you need to do to be clear and present. What's the baggage that you need to shrug off? How do you need to be free in order to drive through your purpose? And in many cases, that also requires you to be detailed, right? And we think of this as a masculine energy, and I agree. But to be detailed in the things, the baggage, the things that are holding you back, the baggage that you're carrying around. Because, as you know well, our baggage requires attention, it requires acknowledgement. And we can't just shrug off baggage without that attention and acknowledgement, right? And that's the feminine version of that moment, of that detailed understanding. Again, balance, right? The masculine is making that list, the feminine is the acknowledgement.
Mhm. Mhm. I love that.
Go ahead.
So, one of the things I tell my clients often is that the energy in which you do something is more important than the thing that you're doing itself.
Ooh, yeah.
And I think this is a beautiful example of that because you can just do all these things, right? Like if you're going to write a social media caption or write an email or like do something in your business. But if you didn't first take that moment to be mindful, to acknowledge whatever is going on in your life, then what is the energy that you're operating out of? And this ties back into be, do, have. So, really focusing on the energy in which you be so that what you do can have the most impact and also have the intention that you put forward, right? Because you might be creating content with the intention of connecting to your clients, connecting to your audience, connecting to your community. But if you're doing that energy from a wounded place, or you brought in like all your baggage that didn't get acknowledged with it, then you may notice that that piece of content probably gets no engagement. And then you wonder, I wonder why this piece of content didn't work, which then reinforces any negative patterns that you created that content from,
Mm-hmm.
which is that baggage that you just talked about that didn't get acknowledged, right? So it's putting ego to the side, acknowledging your inner child from your divine feminine, whatever it is that you're seeking, whether that be validation or acceptance or to be seen or to be heard, giving yourself that those needs, like meeting those needs yourself, and then tapping into that divine masculine to do the actual doing. I think that's my spin on what you said.
I love it. That's fantastic. So let's look at examples of how this plays out, right? So you brought up the social media post, which I love, and we
Mhm.
can combine that with the email where every single sentence had the exclamation point. But let's look at others too. Um, how many times, and I'll answer this for myself first, but you then. How many times have you done a workout and gotten to the end of the workout and said, that had the wrong impact,
Mhm.
right? So I'll go running. And if I don't take the time to clear my mind first and to move into the purpose of the moment and really walk through the value to me of running and what it is that I'm doing while I'm there,
Mhm.
I might find that the first half of the run was just wasted time. Like just I'm 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 just spinning my legs, waiting for my being to come around, to come in. And at worst, at best, it's just wasted time. But at worst, it could be much worse than that. I could have injured myself. Maybe I'm landing wrong. Maybe I'm not paying attention to things in front of me and I trip and fall. Um, so, truly, at worst, something like that could be actually very damaging.
Mhm. I agree. There's been many times that I've forced myself to do a workout without first checking in with self and being like, what is it that I actually need? And maybe I still do the workout, but maybe I adjust the workout based on what my being needs in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Throw back to the competitor days. I must work out. Rest days were like not allowed.
Ooh.
Mhm. I think another example is also perhaps time with friends and family. If you're
Hmm.
not intentionally turning, like I intentionally have to turn off work when I sit down to have dinner with Henrik. So I'm like not bringing like that energy into it, and also being present for like what is there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. 100%. My wife does that to me sometimes. No, the reverse. Like we'll be sitting down together, spending some time together, and she'll be like, You're not really here.
Ah.
Totally fair. And it's like a snap. I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. I need to take my 1 or 2 minutes and like get myself here because this is our time.
Mm-hmm.
And I owe it to myself and I owe it to you for me to be here right now.
Oh yeah. I know this because I get told this all the time too.
You're not really here. Yeah.
That's how I'm always like, oh, okay, turn it off. Let me let me be present. What other examples do you have?
Work. When I'm not balanced in work, I find myself spinning my wheels. Now, it's not that I don't get things done. Like I always get things done. But if I'm not balanced, then a lot of the stuff that I do, I end up having to redo.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about that. When I'm unbalanced with work, um, things don't get done. I like have I'm too scatterbrained. Like I have the intention of doing X, Y, and Z, but like nothing gets done, and I spent that whole day just like waffling around.
So you unbalance into the feminine. And when I'm unbalanced, I typically unbalance into the masculine.
Mm,
So I get like hyper productive, but it's low quality productivity.
got it. So interesting. So for our listeners, I'd love to know, where do you go when you get unbalanced? I think just first having awareness for that. Because now that that seed is planted in my mind, next time I start waffling, I'm like, oh, I'm unbalanced.
And you know what to do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Okay. So first we need to be mindful, and then we need to go through the steps of acknowledging the baggage that we're carrying and
mm-hmm.
be detailed, understand what that baggage is and acknowledge it. And there are some tricks that we can do that make that easier. Do you have any tricks? I do.
On acknowledging the baggage, I want to hear yours first. What are your tricks?
Okay, so number one, don't meditate for this. Do not. This is not the time to meditate. If you are not balanced and you start meditating, what it does is it actually greases the groove. There's a little weightlifting term for you. It greases the groove of being unbalanced. So it actually gets you deeper into an unbalanced state. Right? So do not meditate. Instead, here's one thing that I like to do: go for a walk.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Energy, emotion, it sits in your body. Something you, Shanae, know well and teach. I've heard you teach it. Energy and emotion sits in our body. And if we move, and we move in ways that are easy, relatively unchallenging, and give and work through freedom, right? So taking a walk or doing a yoga session. And yes, I understand that yoga is meditative and we can talk about why, but it isn't itself a meditation. So walking or a yoga session, um, or maybe just some stretching, maybe less focus on the structure, like yoga is pretty structured, and more focus on getting deep into your body.
Yeah, that was going to be my answer too. Moving your body. My go-to is qigong.
Love it.
Mm-hmm.
I
The
love the way you do it too, by the way.
Thanks. There's this little saying where it's like the issues are in your tissues. So like if you are having so it's like if you're having an issue, like if you walk it out, like you're gonna find the solution. It's something about walking. The issues are in your tissues, so you can walk it out.
Awesome. And then journal about it,
Mm.
because the issues that you are aware of are going to actually stick with you for a while, right? When you unburden yourself for the moment, those, they don't go away. You don't set that baggage down and leave it behind. It's more like you put it on your office desk, right? And it sits there on your desk in your little pile, and it's there until you deal with the issue. So you can set it down in order for you to be able to move forward in the moment, and should, but it doesn't go away.
Mhm.
And so you have to journal about that so that you don't need to rediscover it every single time you need to be productive at something. And remember, when I talk about productivity, I don't just mean um, profit productivity, I also mean rest productivity or workout productivity or fun productivity. Like you can go play a game and not have fun. And in my personal opinion, if you were not having fun while you were playing a game, that was low productivity time. But if you were having fun while you were playing that game, that's high productivity time.
Yeah, like think about how many times for our listeners that you decided to like take some time off and do self-care or just like take the evening off, but your mind was running a million miles a minute and like you couldn't shut off. Like,
Mm.
but you took time off. But I like how you said that it's low productivity. It's not a high value time off, low value time off.
Yep. Same thing when you're escaping. So I don't have any problem with escapism. I use it myself. But escapism, I would like people to know, in my opinion, escapism is always low value, low productivity time, right? So watching TV, watching movies. If you're watching movies because you are literally a movie buff, and this is an important part of who you are and how you come into the world, that's cool. That changes what I just said for you. But for most people, that's not true. For most people, entertainment is actually escapism. It's
Mhm.
not a bad thing, right? But know what it is, know what the role it plays in your life is, make sure that you are using your time carefully and intentionally.
Yeah, I call that buffering.
Yep. Yep. That
Buffering.
works.
Buffering. It's like when your computer is loading, web page is loading. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
buffering your life away.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really important distinction because, you know, so many people, or some of my clients actually don't even allow themselves to watch TV. They don't even allow themselves a little bit of escapism. And I just like you, I think doses of that are actually very healthy for you to just tune out and let your brain just veg out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, micro doses, I would say, is really good.
Microdoses.
Micro doses, yeah, micro doses of escapism. I'd love to use, or do we have the next step? Because I'd love to take this into like a real situation and talk through it.
I do have the next step. So once you've journaled and you've got that list, and it's important to have that list, right? Because again, every single time you need to be productive in the moment, like it or not, until you've actually dealt with that pile of issues on your desk, it's there and you have to unburden yourself over and over and over again in order to be productive in the moment for the next period of time, right? So you have that list. And let's say you want to be productive for the next hour, productively spending time with your wife, productively recording a podcast, productively winding down for the evening. You take out that list and you spend the time acknowledging each of those things that you're setting down and give it the energy of, I'm acknowledging you and I'm setting you down for the moment. Okay. Once you've done that, now you have this sort of um, release state about you. You might find you need to go to the bathroom. So do that. But then you need to release that release state. And the question is, how do we release a state that isn't burdened? Right? So we've gone into this state of release in order to get rid of the things that are burdened. But how do we release a state that isn't burdened? So here's a question. Have you ever gone outside to play with your dogs and been in super, super playful energy, and then come inside and started interacting with, let's say, Henrik, but you're still in playful energy and he's in another energy? Have you ever had to do something to release yourself from that playful energy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because I'm too hyper for him. So he asks me, "Can you take it down a couple of notches?"
Mm-hmm. And how do you do it?
How do I do it? I think what I do is I actually take a couple breaths. So it's like
Mhm.
I like move the energy through me physically. I'm like, okay, let me relax a little bit. I'll take a couple deep breaths, and that helps me clear the energy.
It's a good trick because when you activate your lungs, most people don't know this, but your lungs actually go all the way to the top of your shoulders. And
Mhm.
in activating your lungs, you actually have to press your organs out of the way, all the way down to your pelvis, right? So when you activate your lungs, it actually activates your entire torso, the whole thing. So when we talked about states, energy is in your body, and in order to move the energy, you actually move your body. So deep breaths are activating your entire torso. It is very literally moving the energy throughout your body. It's awesome. There are other ways to do this. Now that you know that taking a deep breath is just about creating deep movement. So what else could you do now that you know?
You could move your body. You could probably do like a 2 minute like Tabata, something where you just burst the energy out of you so that you can um, activate your parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah. Yeah. Or a Qigong or jumping up and down on a trampoline.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the absolute universal 100% works for absolutely everyone unless they've had a really bad experience in high school is dancing.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Turn on
There
the
are a few
song.
people out there that have some real serious trauma stored in them with dancing, and I weep for those people. Um, as far as I'm concerned, they need to spend some serious time freeing themselves up from that trauma because dancing is magic.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, that is so true. You always feel so good.
And it releases you from your previous energy state as long as it was unburdened.
Oh, okay. That's a really big distinction to make, as long as it was unburdened. Okay.
All right, now all of this sounds like an enormous amount of stuff to do in order to get 20 minutes or an hour of productive time.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, unless you've been doing it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that doing it for a while makes you quicker at doing it. It's that most of the things that I mentioned carry over, right? So you have to build your list. But once you've got your list, of the paperwork that's sitting on your desk, right? The burdens that you're carrying around, once you've got that list, you have it. And all you have to do is modify it from time to time as new things come on and as you permanently release some of those things through self work that you do consistently, right? So you've got that list. You don't have to rebuild it over and over again. Many times you get so good at that that you no longer even have to look at an actual list on paper. I've got that list in my head. I know what are the burdens that I need to release myself from. And so it only takes me just a moment to give the attention and acknowledgement that those energy burdens on me require, again, in the moment. Now they're coming back. They're not going away. There's a bungee cord, right? It drops, it bounces back up off the floor. It's right back onto my shoulders an hour later. But it's actually not hard to be able to go through the day releasing the burden, being productive, the burden comes back, releasing it again, being productive, the burden comes back, because most of the prep work to free myself up so that the dancing works only takes me a couple of seconds.
Mm-hmm. Can you go a little bit deeper into like what might be some burdens that people are carrying that they don't realize are burdens that they're carrying?
I like that. Okay, so first, people have, we talk a lot about core wounds.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that your audience is probably pretty familiar with the idea of core wounds.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we can talk quickly about how to identify some of those core wounds.
Oh yeah, I've talked about this a lot.
Okay, so let's skip over that. They can go to one of those episodes.
So
There,
know what your core wounds are, basically. Yeah.
know what your core wounds, but there's more than just that.
Mm-hmm.
We experience constant trauma all the time, all the time. For example, nobody likes to lose anything ever. How often do you misplace your keys? If you're like me, you misplace your keys like 4 times a day. Now, I don't carry around long-term burden from misplacing my keys, but it is a trauma, and it's a trauma that you have to work through in the moment in order to be released from that trauma every time it happens. Every time it happens, because keys are important. And when you misplace something important, your body's like, fuck, I did it again. Oops, am I not supposed to say that?
No, it's fine.
Okay. So
Earmuffs for the kids. Earmuffs.
earmuffs. So we interact with the world in a way that is, whether we like it or not, reactive, and we have to identify the things that cause that reaction to create traumas. And losing your keys, I mean, for me, I'm pretty good at this point. Like, I can release myself from the trauma of losing my keys as I pick them up, like, because I know it's there, I know it's something that I have to deal with, so that's fine. But for most people, whether you know it or not, losing something important is a trauma. Your keys are important.
Mhm.
Your cell phone is important. Every time you have to press your little button on your watch to go find your cell phone, that actually is a trauma. And you need to release that trauma. It's a small trauma. Releasing it is relatively easy. But if you don't, it builds up over time. And those are really hard to identify as core wounds because they're so small.
Mm. It's like micro traumas.
Think of like, and again, your audience probably can identify nicely with this. Think of a stress fracture.
Hmm. Yeah, that is so true. Something so tiny can turn into something so big. I think
Yeah.
this is it kind of like reminds me of like every time you don't speak your truth and you like bite your tongue. Like I feel like that's like a micro trauma that like can go into a full blown like burden if you're not acknowledging it. Or for me, you know what it is? It's when my dogs bark when I need them to be quiet. That's
Yeah.
my micro trauma, and I can feel that now that I'm aware of this and what you just shared with us. Now I can be more aware of it as I move through my day, because I'll find myself at the end of the day being so frustrated. And Henrik will come home. He's like, "Why are you so angry?" And I'm like, "I'm just so annoyed." And then, I can't really put my finger on what it is. And then later I'm like, oh, the dogs were really bad today. Like they were like really, really bad today. And I was so frustrated with them. I was so annoyed with them. And he'll be like, "Okay, I'll work from home tomorrow to help you out." So interesting.
Aw, aw, Henrik.
Yeah, he's great. But yeah, 4 dogs was a lot to take care of. So sometimes that's definitely a micro trauma that I did not just have the awareness of. So now I will consciously release it.
That's awesome. Oh my
Mhm.
God, that's so cool. We
Yeah.
got to watch you figure that out right live.
I know, I love it. And I'm like kind of just thinking like, where else might that show up? And definitely if you're a mom, like kids can be so very triggering, right? That's definitely like micro trauma that like compounds over the course. And then I know for a lot of like my clients who are moms, one of the things that we used to talk about was like yelling at their kids. And it's like they say like, "I don't want to yell at them, but I react in this way." And so I think this is a really great example of a burden that we get to consciously unshrug and release going into some of these like activities. So moving into your masculine and your feminine, like moving into those energies.
So cool.
Yeah, I love that. This is really cool. I didn't think about this before.
Okay, so you had a question and you didn't get to it because you wanted more examples. So what was that question?
Well, the question was, what are some examples of burdens? That was the question. And we covered that. Those are some examples of burdens.
Yeah. And, I think people, I mean, we take micro traumas all the time. Like, imagine you call up your parents and you're talking to your parents, and you're talking about a thing that you do that you're really proud of and they don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, with practice, you'll get to the point where you give all of the people you interact with, you give them the grace of not understanding, right? But it takes practice. So if you haven't done that practice and you're working with your parents, you're talking through, "Hey, this is the thing I'm doing," and you're really proud of it. And they're like, "That sounds dumb." Like, it's not that they don't love you. It's not that they don't care about you. They just don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's a micro trauma. And maybe it's one you're aware of, but my guess is for many people, that's one that they're not aware of.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing happens with your spouse
Mm-hmm.
or your significant other. You're talking about something that you're really excited about and they don't understand. And you're just like, "What the fuck? Like, how can you not understand? Like, how can you love me and not understand that?" And like, take it down a notch. Like, take your deep breath, unburden yourself so that you can accept that it's not about you coming from them. They just don't understand. And that's okay. Co-workers, boss, you come to your boss with this great idea that makes your company a whole bunch of money, like, hey, I've got this idea, let's talk about it. And your boss is like, no, I want you to stay focused. Oh my God, I've heard this so many fucking times. No, I want you to stay focused on the thing you're doing. Like, but this is like, this is big, let's talk it like it's no, I want you to stay. Like, that right there is a perfect example of something that grew into stress fracture for me. Like, I had to spend time dealing with those micro traumas that built up over time into something that was a real serious, it more or less became a core wound for me. It's not anymore, I've worked through it, but it became big enough that it was a core wound.
Interesting. So interesting. Huh. That's really interesting. So I think the big takeaway is to have awareness for what your core wounds are. And this goes back to actually one of my clients asked me this yesterday. She was like, how come they never go away? She was like, like, say you got a limiting belief. She was like, I worked on it. I was unshakable. And then, this, and this happened. And then it came back. And she was like, why doesn't it just go away? And I think I coached her through that for her to come to her own conclusion of why it doesn't go away. But one thing that I say to people all the time is like, just because you become aware of a core wound and you're able to shift through it in one scenario of your life doesn't mean that it's fixed and cured and healed forever. Like, healing is a journey. And these are wounds that will always, I don't want to use the word always because it's so definitive, but these are wounds that will be carried with you, you know, throughout your life. And the more awareness that you have for it, just like how you said, I have awareness, I've moved through it. It's not something that bothers me so much anymore, but it may just pop up every now and again. And I think that's so important to know. And that just because it pops up doesn't mean you're broken. Just because it pops up doesn't mean that you are back to square one. It's just a burden that you now have more awareness of. You have the tools and the words and the language to move through it. And it's just so important to be aware of it as you move into the things that you're doing. So, like, for example, one of my core wounds is like the need to be accepted, that I don't matter. And so, prime example of everything we're talking about, last year when I first launched the mastermind, these core wounds, these burdens, they were strong. They were really strong. And they came into my containers, and it affected my coaching, and it affected how I was showing up for my clients. So I was operating from more of a wounded energy because I didn't know how to move through what we've discussed today. I didn't know how to move through the masculine and the feminine. I was really stuck there. And so what I did, without really knowing why I did it, but exactly what Lucas shared today, was being mindful. Like, okay, so I became aware of the limiting beliefs that were impacting my ability to show up as a leader for my clients. So then I became mindful about it, and I was like, all right, let me figure this out. I remember I, logged off social media for a while. I journaled on it a lot. I did lots of walks on this, really trying to figure out, like, why do I feel such huge imposter syndrome for this thing that I'm doing? I've attracted the most amazing clients. The container is filled. Why am I so hard on myself? Like, why do I feel like I can't do this? And then I realized what the wounds were. I realized that my desire to be liked and accepted was playing out. I saw my martyr of needing to save everyone playing out. And I saw my ego needing validation starting to be played out here too. And then so once I became aware of those burdens, I was able to release them, shrug them off, so that when I went back into the coaching containers, the mastermind calls, I wasn't letting my ego come into it. I intentionally said, you know what, inner child, sit over here. I will acknowledge you after these calls. Right now, let me show up as my highest self. Let me be in my divine masculine for these clients.
Mm.
That's like a real tangible example of how when you don't know how to move through your energy, what can happen, and then what becomes possible for you after. So, before it was imposter syndrome. The clients were there, but I still didn't feel good enough. The clients were there, and I was like, oh man, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? And then after I became aware of it, that was the best mastermind experience I've ever led. And my clients got everything they needed. It was, I showed up for myself, I showed up for them. I moved through that wounded energy, I moved through my ego needing validation. And I moved through my feminine and my masculine to really be the leader that they needed. And so that's what becomes possible for you when you learn how to do this.
Yeah. Amazing.
What do you got to add to that?
Maybe another time we can talk about where those things come from and why they never go away.
Yeah,
But
that's a
that
great
might need to be
episode.
its own conversation.
A whole other conversation, but yes, yeah, it's just so important. So now when my need for validation comes up, when I feel like I don't matter and I'm looking for validation elsewhere, I'm just aware of it and I acknowledge it. And like you say, I shrug that burden off and I don't bring it into whatever I'm about to do, whether that is just having dinner with Henrik or having a coaching call with a client or writing a caption, right? I'm not writing captions and creating content to be heard, right? Because that's just like me yelling into a void. Social media is a void, but instead I'm creating content to connect.
Mhm.
And that everything that you do has energy attached to it. Everything that you put out into the world has an intention and has energy attached to it. So you being aware of what energy you're in as you're creating, consciously creating, being in your divine mother, I think will create a greater impact for what you're doing.
Yeah. So then there's one final step.
Perfect.
So we talked about how to unburden yourself and then free yourself, right? So you're in a basically energy void.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we spent some deep time talking about how to make that possible. And now we're in an energy void. We talked about the benefit of moving into the right energy, but we didn't actually talk about how to do it.
Oh yeah.
Mm. So last week we introduced all of the different avatars. And I'm using the word avatar intentionally. So we talked about, and you probably remember this really well in your mastermind last year when you invited me in, we talked about bringing that avatar up,
Mm-hmm.
right? So let's speak in terms of magic. Let's call it summoning. You summon the avatar of the divine mother that you need to be spending some time in right now. Okay, so first, your energy void, right? We shrugged our burdens and then we danced for 2 minutes to drop the drop energy, right? And now we're energy void. And the nice thing about being energy void is that the next thing that comes along will fill you up. It will fill you up. So you can either let a thing come to you through somebody else's intentions. And for those of you who are listening and not seeing, I'm holding my cell phone, right? So if you stop after dancing and the first thing you do is pull open social media, you're actually letting somebody else dictate your energy for you. Is that a bad thing? No, but it's outside of the intention of what you just did.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Or you can spend the extra effort, and it doesn't take very long. Let's call it another 2 minutes to fill that void that you just created with your own intent. Now, this could look like casting a spell to you if you're on the woo side of the spectrum, or it could look like programming a computer to you if you're more on the scientific side. Yes, our brain works like a computer. It's really cool in that way. Because it works like a computer, the people who are woo, right? The people who think in terms of like casting a spell, it actually works. It's no different than uploading a program into your brain. You're casting a spell for yourself. You're filling that container with a very specific purpose-driven energy.
It's
Okay.
setting an intention.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we have the benefit and the challenge of having a programming language. So I'm English as a first language. My programming language is English. For some people who are bilingual or multilingual, you can do really cool things with programming I mean, really cool things. But even for people who are single language or have a very strong first language, I know multiple languages, but I have a very strong first language. I spoke only English for most of my childhood, right? So all of my programming is in English. It still works because what you've done is you've primed yourself for this programming. And again, the way that nature and biology works is everything works for a period of time. So for us, when we cast a spell on ourselves for productivity in the moment, again, it could be productively spending time with your significant other, right? So when we cast a spell on ourselves for productivity in the moment, it will only last for a certain period of time, and then it starts to get weaker.
Mhm.
Make sense? So the language of your programming, the language of your spell casting is actually very important to you. And I can't tell you what that is, but I can give you some hints where to look for what that language is for you. Number one, you have to find the word that is most powerful that describes important. The word for you that's most powerful that describes important, because your brain, your computer, it knows when you tell it something is important. It understands that. So find the word that actually speaks to that. All right, number one. Number two, you have to find the language that describes being productive to you. So for me, that language actually is productive. It's great, simple, right? But it's not true for everybody else. Maybe that language is flow. Maybe that language is greased or groove or I don't know, but you have to find that language for yourself, because that's the language of your spell. That's the language of your programming.
This is so interesting. I'm going to actually have to do this myself.
Well, you do when you're wind down for bed.
Yeah, but I think my languaging might actually be in Japanese.
Oh, cool.
I dream talk in Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
So
You're gonna have so much fun with this.
yeah, yeah. And this is what we're going to be diving deeper into during our 5-day goddess initiation. What day we're going to talk about this? The language of source, day 4?
Day 4, yeah. This is source and ritual.
So we'll be diving deeper into this if this is intriguing you. But yeah, I'm going to have to figure out what mine is. This is really cool. So that's step number 4.
And that's it. And once you've done that, now you're primed, you're programmed, you're spelled, right? In order to be able to be productive over a period of time.
I love that. So let's recap. Step 1, mindfulness. Step 2, opening yourself up to, how would you phrase that?
To two things, right? To the burdens that you have and to what needs to be done to relieve yourself in that moment.
Perfect. And then step 3, creating the void by releasing this energy state that you're in through dancing.
Yes.
And then last one, step 4, casting your spell, setting your intention, reprogramming your mind.
Filling that void.
Filling that void. Oh, I love that. That's so cool. I'm so excited to do this myself. And it sounds like a lot, but I bet you would only, like, the first time you do it, it's probably going to take like 20 minutes, but then afterwards it's like 4 minutes.
Yeah. When you're used to it and good at it, it should take 4 minutes or maybe 3 minutes. Like it's pretty quick.
I love that. So not only do we are we more aware and being able to do things from a higher state of productivity, but we're not bringing in our wounded inner child with it.
Better, because remember, as I was talking about filling that void, you're actually calling up the avatar of the energy that you're going to work with, right? So if you're moving into mother, You have the words that you're using for programming, but the imagery you're using is the avatar of that mother,
And we
right?
can call
Or
up warrior maiden. We can call up
exactly.
the strategist, the enchantress, the masculine energy of the divine.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, this is good. And we've created archetypes for each one, which makes it even easier.
This is what you need. You need that picture in your mind to be able to overlay on the, like, whether we like it or not. We think in both words and images, both.
Yeah. Well, the language
And
of the
so
subconscious
by using
mind
the
is,
two,
go ahead. The
well, by
language of,
using the two of those things together.
we keep interrupting each other. Okay, you go first.
Okay. So by using the two of those things together, you're actually making it powerful,
Hmm.
right? Not just important, but right, meaningfully powerful.
Hmm. And my add on to that is that the language of the subconscious mind is pictures, sounds, and feelings, not words. So the conscious mind uses words and the subconscious mind uses pictures and feelings. Awesome. So we're going to be teaching you all about masculine and feminine energy, the feminine archetypes of womanhood, as well as the masculine archetypes of womanhood. And so if you want to learn more about what these avatars are, that's what we're going to be diving into during our 5-day goddess initiation, which is coming up. It's going to be April 26th to
10
April,
days.
yeah, oh my gosh, less than 2 weeks. So we're going to have all the links down for you below so that you can sign up. It's free to sign up. And if you want to upgrade to the VIP experience, where you'll be getting workbooks and then daily Q&A sessions with Lucas and I, that's also available. So all the details are down below. Before we wrap up, do you have anything else to kind of tie the bow?
I think we did a nice job. I don't think I need to tie it up.
I think we did too. I hope that this episode opened up your eyes as it opened up mine, and just gives you a little bit more of that strategy and that system of how to move between your divine masculine and your divine feminine, and a real steps on how we do shift our energy so that what we do has the impact and the intention that we want it to have.
Yeah.
Yay! Awesome. Well, we'll see you guys in the goddess initiation. And
Yay, I can't wait.
yeah, and then you can DM us on Instagram if this episode resonated with you, and let us know what your favorite part was and how you decide to incorporate it and integrate it into your life.
Yeah. Oh, I would love to have some feedback. Yes, please share.
Yeah, do it and let us know how it worked. Well, I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your day. I'll see you guys next week, same time, same place. Don't forget to be your highest self. Bye for now.